Hello.
Let's see, let's refresh Cryptic Studios, the Twitch, because sometimes it doesn't like to show up. Confirmation of life. It looks confirmation of life on my end, but I want chat confirmation of life. How's everybody doing? Listen to Misfit Mouse. Y'all behave now. It looks confirmation of life on my end, but I want chat confirmation of life. How's everybody doing? Oh, I should mute myself so I don't double hear myself. Alright, folks. Hiya, yay, confirmation of life. We are alive. And I guess live as well. Greetings and good morning. There were a number of people already of you waiting a few minutes. Normally I lurk into the chat channel before we start, and there's a lot of you, so welcome. I'm sure more people will start trickling in, but we want to get started as quickly as possible. So I will start with quick introductions. I am Nidacris, or Julia, your, I'm sure, much beloved community manager. I engage with the community. You get sick of me very quickly, but I'm sure you love me. But I am joined this morning with two of our team members, and I will let each of them introduce themselves. So start with you, Jared.
Hello, I'm Jared. I am a lead system designer. You know me on the forums, there's no worries. As someone pointed out, I have new big headphones, or I have a small head, one of the two.
Both. I'm Chris. I help support the dev team and the community, mainly the dev team. Yep.
All right, they are two men of few words. All right, so today's stream is going to be about the combat rework and the bonding and companions. We announced the bonding runestone and companion changes prior to Thanksgiving, and then on Friday we released a new build on preview on Mimic with also the combat changes, and released the details on that as well. And we encourage everybody to go and check them out. We wanted people to have some hands-on experience before today's stream. If you haven't had a chance to try it out, you're more than welcome to ask questions, but we will be giving priority to those who've actually tested it. So there is some more foundational knowledge on how that works. So yes, we're going to start taking questions live. So, all right, start posting questions.
Well, we also have a list of questions as well, which we can dig into, Jared spent the whole weekend on forums. I spent the whole weekend on YouTube and Twitch, so we have a lot of questions there. One thing I wanted to talk about quickly before we jump into the questions is just that I kind of dropped the ball. We talked a while ago about the CDP evolving, the Collaborative Development Program, so that we wouldn't just do it on the forums, but we would actually put it in game for people to play in an earlier stage than we normally would. I don't know if Jared disagreed, but I think we're roughly 80% completion on this system, and we wanted to pull the curtain back so everyone could help us develop, help us feedback, help us play, help us with metrics. So yeah, sorry for not being clearer on that, but I think that I didn't help there. I think that added some confusion to what was going on. You are literally seeing the dev environment pretty much in sync right now in regard to this system evolution.
All right. We already had a couple questions coming in. Jared, I don't know if you caught any. I've been trying to copy and paste to make sure that I don't miss them. So I don't know if you caught any so far that you want to answer, or if you want me to just go through them.
Sure. There were some questions on the Forte. So I did just make a post this morning. One of the questions has been why awareness. There's a lot of people that don't like awareness because they feel it's never applicable. One of the things that we've been talking about internally on the dev team is that exact problem with combat advantage, because for players, when they're fighting groups of mobs, they're not as concerned with it. They can generally kill through those pretty fast, and when they're fighting bosses, they always have a boss position. And one of the things we're looking at is to make single target bosses and trial bosses, especially the more powerful ones, always have combat advantage on as part of their abilities, which would make awareness a much more useful stat for a lot of players. So for those of you seeing that on a defensive stat and thinking it's useless, it may actually become a lot more useful. And as for how we picked the Forte stats, we tried to spread them out. We tried to give some differences, some interests. Did different ones. Obviously, we'll probably shuffle some of those around as people get their feedback and what they think fits those types of classes better. But we are trying to stick with one offensive and one defensive stat for the secondaries for all the classes. And that conversation is going on, so feel free to jump in and share your ideas.
We did get another question. I'm not going completely in order, just things that make more sense. And Harper Steele did ask, do you have an estimate for when the next sweep through on preview will be implemented and available for further testing? And I know that was something we talked over the weekend or on Friday about when to get a new build out, an updated preview build. So Jared, I don't know if you have any more information on that, or Chris.
So it's tough to give firm dates because we are, as Chris said, we're working on this. It's in development right now as we speak, and we are making builds and testing stuff out. I think we were trying to see if we could get one potentially tomorrow, but we wouldn't know for sure until either later today or tomorrow. But we are looking to get at least one out this week, and potentially two if we can as well. But it is just as we go with the flow and we get the builds and get the stuff as quickly as we can get out to people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, basically, the way it works is where we are currently in development is we already have a build that we're working on with lots of bug fixes. We chose to keep that over the weekend and not introduce any more issues, so that'll be coming out shortly. And then we intend to do one iteration stream or more a week, probably Monday, from which we basically take the feedback from the latest build that was out and the discussion with the players. We then have the stream, we discuss that feedback, we go over it, and then we take actions based on that stream that go into the build following that. Once that build is out, we then have another stream and so on until we get to the place where we're all pretty happy.
Cool. And I will notify the community as soon as we have a new build out. I'll post about it. I encourage people to go and check it out, and the preview forums will also still be active. So I've seen a number of questions roll in that can kind of be encompassed into how are people kind of like all the work they put into their characters now, all the enchantments, all the gear. Players want to know if, like for example, how come we will not be able to exchange single stat enchantments for triple stats in the exchange vendor when one of the primary focuses of endgame players is whether they use single stat or triple stat, and that comes from UHC Gaming DKK. So there's a lot of questions about exchanges.
Pretty early on the preview forums, I called out that people are going to be talking about exchanges. It's going to be a focus for them. And my call was just that we wanted to give some time both to give players more time with the system to get a feel for it, to see how they were going to build their characters, what they're going to need, and to fix bugs. For example, the Storyteller journals were giving 20% power instead of 2% power with their set bonus. But it's not that those exchanges are off the table. We most likely will have exchanges. The question is just which ones we're going to have. And so we want to give more time to narrow that in before just committing to the ones that we don't need or too many. So, most likely, even as players go on, they'll still want to exchange for Radiance. And so we'll probably have an exchange for Radiance. But it's just we want to take some time to make sure we're making the right exchanges, not just throwing everything in there and everyone swapping out every single thing they ever own. It's what do they really need to exchange. So, we'll probably get there within a week or so of narrowing that in on exactly which items. So there will be different forms of exchanges. We're just still working on what they will be.
Yeah, we want to see people playing more. We, obviously, as we noticed, Aragon's video, for example, 12 hours in, he goes in and the kind of system opens up a lot more to him, and we've been seeing that over the weekend. So big part of this, and thank you, is seeing you guys play, hearing the feedback, and then also in regard to, our goal is that no one feels kind of like play or buy remorse. We want this transition to be as smooth as possible, and so that includes, and I'm sure this will be a question later, evaluating celestial weapons. It includes evaluating T3 weapons and so on. So this isn't like this is going to be hard for people, but who haven't followed the CDP, but over the next X number of weeks or month or whatever. It's not a typical preview where it's like everyone has a week to give feedback. You have a much longer period of time, so we want to take that time to make the right decisions and to be able to listen properly to what everyone's saying and see just how they're experiencing the new system. the updated system.
And this is a question probably, Chris, you might want to tackle first, which is how long, or, Jared, of course, how long time ago was this planned? And the second part, which I think goes really well, so Tasper Boy asked how long ago this was planned, and then we also had a few follow-up questions from Hayden, which is, why do we think it was necessary to make these changes? So for how long have we thought about it, and why did we think it was necessary? So I don't know, Chris, if you want to try to take a stab at that first.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What was that?
The first question was, how long ago were these changes planned? And second part is, why are we making these changes?
Well, I'll answer at a high level, and then Jared can answer in more detail. We've been thinking about this for over a year. Is it over a year? A year. We have been spending a lot of design time and design thinking in regard to this. For a long time as well. Jared's been working hard, as well as a few other members of the team, on getting this basically into development. We have multiple streams of developers and content on the team, so we're never just working on one thing, because I know that that's a question that will come up, like, why this instead of content? Well, there's lots of content coming. And then why? To add more variety, to add more runway. We said at the beginning of this year that we were going to refactor the game so it could be evergreen, so that we could build the platform moving forward. And a platform means not just kind of content and systems, but also technology. And will we be seeing an increase in fidelity in the future, and so on. We want to basically, at a high level, have a platform moving forward that doesn't require changes all the time, that doesn't, where we can focus more on pioneering, focus more on the player experience, and less on, for want of a better term, fixing stuff. So there's the high level answer. I think over the next, however many weeks, it's going to become clearer and clearer. Lots of members of the community have already called out why we went in this approach. And I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but a lot of people can see kind of what we're doing here, what kind of experience we're trying to get back to, how we're trying to refresh the whole of the game. And you can see that clearly in terms of older items in the game, which are now super special and super important, and all that kind of thing. So there's the high level answer to that. I'll pass it over to Jared.
Yeah, the thoughts and how we want to approach it have been there for a while, and that stemmed from a few things. One is scaling never working well, either in our opinion or the player's opinion, requiring players to take off gear, to mess with their setups a lot for scaled areas. Just doesn't feel good. There's also always a lot of confusion when players couldn't see their percents. They were asking a lot of other players what values they needed to get to. They weren't sure where they were at. So we really wanted to tackle those things, make item level accurate, make scaling accurate, make the game easier to work with and know where you're at. And we also wanted to fix some problems we have where, as people point out, and why they bring up these exchanges, is the game basically boiled down to a high end. All you focused on was power, because you capped the other stats. They don't matter. It was the only uncapped stat. And so that doesn't really make for an interesting game, doesn't make interesting itemization, interesting builds. So by bringing all the stats into the same formulas, into the same restraints, and not having them all cap out, players have a lot more flexibility in how they're going to build. They have a lot more item options. So we really want to expand on that and make overall the game more interesting. And change is always rough, and we're trying to help with that and make it as smooth as we can. But I think in the long term, it will give a much brighter future for Neverwinter and the possibilities that we have.
For the person saying, oh, there's going to be an exodus and that kind of thing, that just isn't the case. Like, we could see the metrics and so on. I think it's a little bit bumpy of an introduction, and that was my fault. I should have explained more, but we all have multiple things going on at once. Another part of this is accessibility and sense of progression for new players, but mainly we've got an awesome game here. There's tons of content and tons of avenues for experience that we're just becoming more and more obsolete. And so don't look at what we have now as being the final thing. We are still iterating on it and we're still working on it. But the overall goal is to make the game the very best it can be. And yeah, some people aren't going to like it, and that's okay. It's not our job to try and twist people's arms to trust us, or just to accept any changes we make. But 2 points. One, legacy is something that I specifically can't affect. It's intent and execution on intent that matters. And then secondly, I forgot because I haven't had any sleep. But yeah, there's the first one. I'll remember the other one later.
We did have one question that I wanted to address, which is, I think Wife Rhoda asked, what is already noticed to be wrong at moment preview, so we know not to focus on. So I think you're asking about a known issues list. There already is one in the preview subforums that has known issues that we published on Friday. And when we release a new build, we will try to update that list so that you know what is still a known issue, so what is still not working properly on preview, and also what we've addressed since the last time. So we hope to maintain that list active.
And I've been trying to comment on a lot of the threads to call out where people bring up things that might be bugs and confirm them and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of information through threads. One of the ones people noticed a lot is that there's a good chunk of augment companions that aren't getting proper stats. That'll be fixed in a future build, and that'll solve a lot of confusion around what pets to upgrade and why fighting companions seems so much better than augment upgrade.
Yeah, we definitely saw some questions in chat about the augment.
Just to talk to Finney's point, yes. Well, Jared can answer this, but Finney was, with the comment about old items being super special, are we going to be able to access some of the ones that are legacy that are no longer available? I would have thought so, yes. It refreshes content in our war chest that we can bring back, but Jared might have other points on that. But yeah, that's one of the goals of the system.
And kind of going along with that as well is an earlier question we got was, can these changes somehow help bring back old dungeon and skirmishes? Since we also got a number of veteran players over the weekend talking about, how these changes affected them and how they remember some of the older content, and maybe like as a kind of a trade-off, so for all the changes they're going to have to make when the changes are implemented, if they can get some of the old content back that they really liked. So I know they're still focused on that. I know that's not exactly about combat changes, but I'm wondering if we can comment on if we plan to bring older content back at some point.
So it wasn't even just scaling or other stuff that we turned off on the content. Just because it was pretty bland content. Some of the early skirmishes were just a circle map with waves of critters coming at you to kill. There wasn't much to it, but it pretty much all still exists there. I mean, there's ways that you can turn back on. We used to run those events where we turn on some of the old content so people could work on titles and stuff. So there's certainly options there.
Okay.
Again, for the questions in regard to T3 gear and Celestial gear, yes, we're doing pass on that gear in regard to the system.
Another question we had earlier was, is there a specific reason as to why you chose 90% as the cap for all stats?
Well, I think even as that player pointed out, 100% for some stats would make sense. 100% defense would mean you're just taking no damage and nothing else worked. And we wanted a system that everything was the same. Like before, we had power was uncapped, combat advantage had twice the cap of the other stats, and that makes it more complicated. People have to figure out different things for every single stat. Now they all follow the same rules, have the same caps, have the same distribution of what comes from ratings and what comes from other places. So it just creates a very uniform system.
Just for a little bit of chat maintenance, I do have it on slow mode because the questions are coming really fast, but I also noticed there's a lot of people repeating the same questions. We are going to try to get to as many as possible, and I'm copying and pasting. But if you keep spamming the same question over and over again, it really clutters up my chat, and it actually clutters my ability to see all the questions. And so please just kind of slow down. You can ask a couple times, but after that, just wait. And we will be having more of these streams. We're looking at hopefully a weekly cadence. More information about the frequency of these streams will be posted later today or this week. But so everybody will have a chance to ask questions, and hopefully we can get to as many as possible. But please just don't spam the chat. Really appreciate that. Any questions that Jared, Chris, you've noticed that you want to answer right now?
I mean, like you said, there's been a lot of repeats. As someone called out, yeah, they'll And they said it somewhat sarcastically. But yeah, we're looking for testing on the dungeon so we can get that balance back. We know some things, aren't the same because bosses are so hand tuned. That generally means when we do big changes, we have to go back and hand tune them again to get them that way balanced. So we have some threads for feedback on that, so that we can make those pretty quick and get them into a good spot before we let it go out.
I'm seeing a question from Excessive Force. Before executing this change, why not make an intro mission similar to Acquisitions Inc., which walks you through and shows you how each stat impacts your character? So basically, how are we planning on introducing players into the new system, like stat, like any kind of tutorial we have envisioned, or will we develop one over time if we feel that there's a need for it?
So someone's saying something about my mic. I'm not sure what that means. We did some sound checks ahead of time, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, you sound fine to me. I know that sometimes my microphone doesn't sound that great to other people, so it could be on there as well.
But I actually think for new players, it's a bit easier to get into this system than for people that are endgame now and are very used to the old system. Like, you won't get exposed to all the other sources of stats right away. You won't be dealing with Forte until you get to Paragon path. So they kind of will step through it in an easier to digest manner. In a future update, we are working on improving that leveling experience in several ways. So we will tackle some better tutorials and stuff at that time as well to really make it a lot easier for people.
And someone said you sound bassy, and he always sounds bassy. Jared's just got a deep voice.
Yeah, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah. We have a question, which is, what is replacing Armor Pen in the Stronghold boon since that is going away?
It should be Critical Severity, I believe I did. Okay. Switch that, just like the other sources.
There's a question about healing, and how does healing work now? Let's answer that one.
Is that you wanted me to do that one?
You go ahead.
So the only change to healing is that your critical strike chance is now just your critical strike chance. It's no longer a comparison of power. So whatever your critical strike says on your character sheet, that is your chance to critical heal. Critical severity is still cut in half for heals, just like it is on live, and all the rest of healing is the same. So that should be the only actual fundamental change that you should see.
So the question that Gianluca had is saying, sorry, I just want to catch this now, so we don't have to repeat it again, because we've been having to say it all over the weekend as well, is RAD 15s and items and things that players have basically spent on are all basically on the table for swaps and other things that we're basically looking at. So our goal is to make players not feel remorse in regards to this change in terms of either the amount of time they put in or the value. So again, we are talking about exchanges. We just want to spend a little bit more time looking at people play, listening to the feedback before we pull any triggers there. So hopefully I don't need to reiterate that again today, at least on this stream.
Something I saw over the weekend as well was a lot of people wondering when these changes were going to go into effect. Were they tied to M20? Were they going to go out in like a week? I think there was a lot of concern over how much time we're actually giving people to check it out on preview, and how much iteration time are we giving ourselves. So I know we're not going to release it. We're not going to announce any kind of like specific dates, but can we at least reassure players that it's not going to be like thrown at them next week live?
Yeah, again, I don't know if you want to take this, Jared. This is... Yeah, Jared, you go ahead. I already explained earlier. You can explain this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were planning for Saturday, but no, it's, the reason we haven't announced any release date is that we don't, we're working on it. We want to step through it. We want to get all the bugs fixed. We want to, adjust stuff so that it plays better, so that it's all in a good place. So, that's why we haven't announced a specific release date. I can say it certainly won't be in the month of December, if that helps people out. But beyond that, we're when it's good and ready, then we're going to put it out online.
Misfit asked why why the combat changes were not announced in advance as the bonding and companion changes were. And I mean, if you don't mind me answering real quick, I believe it's because we were still testing it internally, making changes. I know that Jared was making changes to the blog that same week, the same week we released the blog. So there's still a lot of iterations we're doing internally. I don't know, Jared, Chris, if you want to.
Yeah, it was, as people can see when they go to try it out, like, this is development that is in progress. This isn't something that we did all the work, we polished it all up, we got it to where we went and put it on preview and said, here you go, this is just what it is, and we're going to put it live in 2 weeks. So we realized that with the bondings going away, that there will be people that might invest in those over the Black Friday and the sales and all that. So we wanted to get an early announcement out on that, but we were still getting all the stuff in a good place. We were still making adjustments. We also knew that there's going to be a lot to digest without being able to go on preview and getting your hands on it. So to try to put out chunks of that information without that access was going to be pretty difficult. So it was just we tried to get some of the information out early to help people out. And once we were in a good place to open this up to players start trying out, and we had finalized some certain areas of it, we put out all the information to our players.
And releasing a build also or information on Thanksgiving week is kind of cruel to the community, because we have people who are on holiday, and it also would be cruel to our team to make them work over that time. So it just the timing, we are trying to be considerate. And yes, I know that the bird is distracting a lot of people, including me.
Sorry, I can put it away if you want.
No, it's a good distraction. It's like my cat, only my cat's sleeping. But yes, we do try to consider time. Like the team, I think, is kind of sick of me saying, please let us not release anything without being able to follow up on. Like, for example, this weekend, I know Jared spent a lot of time on those threads, and Chris as well, and I as well. So we don't want to just throw something at you, even if it's just testing, and not be able to follow up. So timing is pretty important for how we do things as well. Let's see. Other questions? Yes, Harper also asked, what has the team noticed from feedback to be one of the lead issues that prevent players from being able to play content on preview without completely rebuilding? Is it mainly overcapped stats, companion, gear, all of the above? So I guess if you could sum up, what is some of the biggest feedback you've gotten over the weekend, Jared?
Well, I almost think those two parts of the question that don't necessarily go together. For example, yeah, especially if you're a high-end game player, you'll go in, you'll have overcapped power. But that doesn't necessarily stop you from trying out the changes, from seeing what's going on there, any of that kind of stuff. So there is some character adjustments that we'll do, but it doesn't stop you from trying out preview. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the augment stat bug is a big one, because so much item level and stats come from your companion that people obviously are going to focus on that first, and then that gives a misleading view of what their stats would be when they're upgraded. Then of course there's been some broken items that people pointed out. One that gives something like 50,000 accuracy or something like that, and the Storyteller's Journal, which gave 20% power, so 2%. So those kind of things kind of throw off when people are trying to figure out what their character will be like, what their stats will be like. So I think those are the biggest things, and as those get brought up, we're fixing them pretty much as quick as they're brought up. And so hopefully as soon as we get the next build out, a lot of that will be out of the way, and then we'll obviously still be taking reports and fixing the next round, and we'll keep doing that so it gets more and more exact.
There's also a question we just got that I know is something we also discussed internally, because it came originally from the forums, which is, can we get more vendors on preview for their testing companions, especially like you can all corpse from? But basically, I think what they're asking is how can they get access to more companions on preview, just because they don't want to have to spend their time trying to grind for them and get them.
Yeah.
So I know that on the forums last week, someone had a feedback on that, and I passed it on to the team, and there was discussion internally about that. Jared, have we actually taken action on that, or?
So one of the things that I added quickly before we went to preview is that from the preview store, you can get trade bars, and then in the trade bar store, you have mounts with companions, you have high-level chance, you have mount upgrade tokens. So by giving those trade bars, that open up a whole big collection of stuff. You have to go through the 2 steps to get to the trade bars and go to the trade bar store, but there's such a big collection there that gets people a whole lot of things. And we're still working on a couple other things that we can add in there. I'm not going to guarantee it works, but in a future preview, I think there might be a preview VIP that you can get from the Zen store. So we're slowly trying to get stuff like that into the trade bars. Is a big one because there's so much stuff on that trade bar store. Hopefully that helps people quote it.
We also had a lot of questions about the gear. So, like, will the top-end T3 Hunt gear equip bonuses be redone for the next mod? You know, and other pieces of gear rewards that people have been working towards. Are we going to make any changes to gear to adapt it to the new system? Or, you know, if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, we've actually, even in the stream, we've covered this once or twice too. I know it's a big point for people, but we've called it out in a few places. But yeah, we're still getting stuff in the right place. We're still working on stats. And as we get further along in that, we can take a look at, for example, like the Celestial gear, the T3 gear, and adjust those set bonuses. Since that's, you know, the newest gear that people have spent a lot of time getting, we can certainly adjust those to something that is more fitting for those characters in the new system. I suspect there'll be some debate about that between players when we look at what stats it should do and stuff, but that is a topic that we'll be diving into before too long.
Okay. We have a question from Willow. Is there a concern that the math wizards in the community will unduly influence the community and create a single path for the success, therefore reducing variability? How do you work around the path to most optimal? And I think that question can actually be applied to, like, basically any class.
Yeah, that's a great question because, and Jared's obviously going to answer it, but it implies fact that people have been, the more they play, the more they see, in terms of overall variety, not just of build, but of group build and encounter build. But yeah, carry on, Jared.
I mean, I think that's always going to be an aspect of any game that has a lot of builds, and you know, you see it in collectible card games, everything else, where as you're trying to get a handle on the game, you go look at the guides, you see, you know, what people call that as very successful builds, and you emulate it. I think the more people get into the game, the easier they can understand aspects of the game, the more they start varying from that, and they start trying their own builds, they start experimenting. And so I think there'll always be a chunk of any class that is based off, you know, the one or two popular guides out there, but I think there'll be, you know, hopefully with a system that they can understand more and see the percents more exact and all that, but they'll be able to start experimenting on their own, shift some stuff around, and have some room for that while still being successful. I think that's the real key to having people try out their own builds, is that they can experiment and be successful and not have a game where if you're not the perfect optimal build, you're just crushed or you're not in the content. So I think we're moving in a direction where hopefully there'll be more variety. And
again, this isn't going to get completed in a week or 2 weeks. Jared and I and others spent the whole of this weekend working, basically, Jared on the forums, me on Twitch and YouTube, and we intend for this to carry on and for this feedback and conversation to continue as well. This isn't a one-off. In the future, we intend to pull the curtain back at this time of development on other things that we're working on, additional content, and as we build the game out in terms of mode and systems and so on. So we have a good long period to discuss, just like we would internally. It's called an iterative period. The feedback that we get, we do a build, we then play the build, all of us, and then we basically comment on it, and then we make another build and so on. So there was a question that keeps getting asked, which is when are these changes coming out simultaneously on console and PC, Garrett?
I don't know.
I don't.
I mean, I think there's a possibility because they're both on the same module at this point, but they don't have to necessarily launch at the same time. I'm not sure if that's what we'll go with, because there's just a longer certification time to get stuff on the console, whereas with PC, when we feel something's ready to go, we can launch it. So I'm not sure if we'll launch them at the exact same time.
So let's basically, I'll add that to our list of feedback and notes. So we have a list of all the notes that we've taken, coalesced into, it's around 35 unique points we have so far. We've already given our feedback on those. We're going to change the feedback based on today's conversation, which will then impact the next build. Not the next build. The next build was from last week, but the build after that But we'll add that to the list, and we'll keep discussing it with you guys in terms of pros and cons of that.
That one guy asked to show my cat. He's currently sleeping, so I'm not going to disturb him. But I did promise on my Twitter that if things went well today during the stream, I would post a video of my cat purring, which is very soothing. So just incentive for.
Oh, by the way, the players were asking yesterday if there were any codes being given out today. I said I have no idea. It's not the focus of the stream.
Yeah. Today.
Julia?
Today, no, just because, yes, I wanted to make sure that, players who couldn't get their questions answered, wouldn't say, you were using the time to give out stuff instead of answering questions. So, no giveaways today. But we do have another stream this week. We have Ranger Reek hosting the Redeem Citadel, and I'm going to try to get some codes that he can give away during his stream on Wednesday. And then next week, we have potentially 2 streams. One of them being my holiday playthrough stream, which, I will give stuff away during that stream. So we will have more streams with giveaways, just not today.
Furious Honey Badger, which sounds even more frightening than a honey badger, keeps asking the same question about, even though I've answered it twice, about graphics. Is it our intent to increase the fidelity in the game and to rework old zones and kind of reboot them, both in terms of experience and look? The answer is yes, that's part of Project Ascension. We are refactoring the platform. We're about 60% of the way through, I would say. The core foundational stuff outside of fidelity and tech will be complete on Mod 21, and we've got some super cool surprises. Well, we've got loads of cool surprises, but some super cool info for Mod 22, probably in February of next year. And I am currently discussing with various folks in regard to the engine, and so on. So nothing really more to share about that at the moment, but yeah, it's our intent to do that, obviously. We believe that we talked about the fact that we believe that this game, it's already well-known and relatively big MMO. The refactor is going to allow us to basically, including fidelity, get even more sophisticated and become even more compelling across the board in terms of a more modern MMO as we refactor. So yeah.
We did have a question earlier that I meant to get to, which was how long will Redeem Citadel rewards stay for? And I saw that question over the weekend as well. People wondering, basically, the Redeem Citadel content, how long that was going to be available for after, in the future.
I think for PC, you have, I think, beginning of next year. I think I have to actually find the exact time, but I think the events for Redeem turn off basically January 1st for PC, somewhere around that.
And we can try to get an answer to that question for Wednesday's stream. So, there's another question from Gaming Spartan. Is there a worry that with this new system about people lowering item level in order to cap more stats, which may actually increase their damage?
Not really, for a couple reasons. The first is that by doing so, you are lowering your base damage, since your base damage is based off item level. And the other reason is that with campaign zones, we have a thread on this on upscaling for campaign zones. We're moving forward with a system where there's an item level for entry to campaign zones, so you're going to want to have enough item level anyway. And we're going to run events where when those first come out, as long as you get through the intro mission, we're going to upscale you to that item level requirement, which will allow new and returning players a better chance to get into the content while it's new, while it's exciting, while it's in there. And so basically you're going to have item level as a gate for some content, and it directly gives you hit points and damage. So I don't think there'll be a lot of it, but we'll see as players test out stuff on preview. Maybe they'll find that there's a couple flaws where they actually prefer to dump item level.
For folks talking about PvP, as we've said before, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but PvP isn't our focus this year. We do have it on our schedule for next year, so at the moment, this is our focus. The core of the game is the focus. We'll talk more about PvP next year.
We actually have a follow-up question from the person who asked about the stronghold boons and our penetration. They say, if armor pen is going to become crit severity, then what is crit severity going to be? Or will it be 2 crit severity boons?
I mean, I'd have to look at it. I'm not sure what they were set to off the top of my head. I mean, on preview, you can obviously hop in and open up a character and it'll say what the boons are. But I'd have to actually check.
Ranger Week asks, do the changes open the door for more buff debuff builds in classes in the future? So I think when we make these adjustments, are we looking at the future as well?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things about these changes is as people are starting to get used to them, it's opening up the theory crafting of what can we do with items, what can we do with class powers, because it does open up a lot more options for what we can do. We could definitely, potentially go into strengthening some buff or debuff options on classes that feel more meaningful when playing with group and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of options going forward with what we've done.
We also thought, we also had a question, have you thought about changing scaling to average item level of the group instead of hard scaling that would allow people to do solo content or without full group?
I don't think that quite works out for what our system is. So a content, the critter has a given item level, and then we scale you down to a range of that. So for the dungeons right now, we have you scale down to 20% above that. And so group average and all that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. It's more how far above that critter you are, so what kind of bonuses you get into them. So I don't think that would really work for us. So we'll probably stick with everyone's just scaled down to that or scaled up to the level wherever. Either case.
There was another question which is kind of related, which Harper asks, has there been any consideration in increasing the overall damage numbers? The scaling is nice, however, going from 1 million hits to 100,000 hits is demoralizing on top of all the changes in chaos.
We were talking about that earlier, just outside of the a metric standpoint or a systems number standpoint. And a lot of people were talking about it over the weekend, and someone made a very good point, which is what matters is how much of the enemy bar goes down. So that gave me an idea, or us an idea, which is, yes, we do need to have a look at some polish on the UI to add a bit more pizzazz to the damage floaters, but also we've got the possibility of looking at some fighting games to look at how they handle health bar depreciation, like Street Fighter and games like that. From a UI standpoint, so we'll be looking at that also. So from a emotional resonance standpoint, there's your answer. I'm sure Jared has more technical answers now.
Yeah, that's probably good. I would say, so I definitely get bigger numbers are more fun. And I get that people like when we bounce upwards on those numbers. But there's a lot of times where bringing them down and bringing all the numbers into a better range to work with is better for the system. It's better for what's going on underneath the hood. So I don't think we are going to basically just double everyone's numbers and all that stuff and then double all the critter health and do all that just in bigger numbers right now. I know it is a bit of an adjustment. But I also just checked on my local build. There are not 2 crit severity boons. There's crit severity, crit strike, power, and accuracy in build boons.
So one is a commentary from Willow said, just add a 0 to all floaters and everyone feels good. So yeah, there is actually a lot of psychology that goes into how you present numbers to players. But we don't want to do just something that's just fluff. Part of it is getting used to the new visuals, which leads us to the next thing, which is a lot of comments about the health bars. Some people don't really like their appearance. I know we've discussed about this internally with our UX and our UI people. So Jared, do you have any updates, or Chris, any updates on how the look of the health bars?
So we actually have a meeting this week to go over some feedback. Most of the feedback that I've personally seen from different places is that players like the visual look, but they feel that they're too bulky for the screen, so they're taking up too much real estate, especially when there's a lot of critters around. So I think that's big feedback that we'll bring to that meeting, is that if you can, slim them down, make them take up less of the screen, then that will help. their appearance. But there's been a lot of good feedback on visuals, the look of it, and with getting the dots for the ramp and all that kind of stuff.
So a question from a walkie-talkie guy, which we were talking about earlier, Jared. A lot of people have been mentioning, but it seemed to dull down a little bit more over the weekend, which is, if dungeons are going to take 3 to 4 times as long, how will this increase rewards to match time and effort? Well, first of all, it's our goal, as you can see, and we've been putting systems in place, evolving more systems to have the ability to make sure that players are fully rewarded for their time invested. However, we still need to basically look at the rate of which people are completing the dungeons, because the more they delve into the different types of items they could use, the encounter setup, the build setup, it goes from a group, for example, taking an hour to do IC, and then half a day later they're doing it in 30 minutes. So we're definitely focused on it. We just want to see more of how the players settle in, what the real kind of gauge is for if there is an increased amount of effort in dungeons and time now. So, yep, we're absolutely on it. But we got time to basically look at how people are doing and so on, and we'll continue to discuss it together as a community and team.
So actually, just noticing there are discussions still in the chat about the health bar, to go back to that. So there are people with different opinions on that. And I want to say hi to Midnight Light. That's Jules, our UI artist. So hi. So we had a lot more questions coming in. We had Neverwinter Techie, NW Techie, let us exchange companion XP books, which will become obsolete to player experience books. So yeah, exchange companion XP to player XP. Any thought about doing that?
I don't think that would work for most players. If we set up an exchange for those, we'll probably do some AD, because their functionality isn't really matched by anything else. Player XP is very different. A lot of people at max, a lot of people have different thoughts on the overflow rewards. So I think we just go the straight route with the exchange form.
Okay.
In terms of parity between consoles and the cross-save discussion, all of us basically want this. It's definitely something that's higher on the priority list this coming year. So we'll add it to the list, even though it's separate to this. And we'll continue to discuss it as a community and team. In regard to Bofing's, was it Bofing? Someone else was asking about point of view, field of view, I guess, camera position, difference between console and PC. We should discuss that too. Personally, I think it'd be better if it was more like a PC. But that's a separate topic. But we could basically we can discuss it, and perhaps in the next stream.
So I've seen a question a few times on ratings versus other, and how you determine those. So when everything's fixed and in place, if you see something say, adds 5% power, then that goes directly into the other category for the total percent. If you see something say, adds 5,000 power, then that's the rating. And so right now there are still some percent sources that are giving its ratings, and we're trying to catch those down and fix them all. But that'll be the easy way to tell them apart once everything's fixed.
Definitely seeing a lot more questions coming in that are starting to veer more into off-topic or are really, really granular. So we will, as always, pull a chat log of this, but we still want to make sure that these streams are focused and they don't devolve into just a generic stream. So we're not going to talk about content, no hints on upcoming classes. So just a reminder.
Question from Katie. Healing question. Combat companions make targeting players more difficult, and they count as target healing spells which divide the magnitude based on the number of targets. How will you help healers with these aspects?
I guess it depends on what players want. On the one hand, you could argue that if you're using combat companions and they die, then you're losing some of your DPS. Obviously, if your tank dies instead, then it's a much worse situation. It's easy enough to make player healer spells not affect companions, and therefore it wouldn't divide up by that number of targets. But I think we probably have to handle that on a power by power basis, so there's different options for different types of
Also got a question about, or actually a more suggestion. Jared, have you considered reducing power stats from current sources, thereby maintaining the need to keep those to hit the new cap? Otherwise, too many current sources of power will lose value utility due to overcapping.
So there's one of our big goals is to make item level more accurate, and so item level references a certain number of stats. So it's not so much of saying like, oh, this enchant just gives less power now, because it would also mean the item level is lower on that enchant versus other enchants of the same rank. I just think it's a fact that we had a game for years where it was very easy to cap everything else, and so all your focus was on power. And now we're moving to a game where you're considering a lot more stats on how you want to split that out, and stuff will shift over time. We'll stop making all items that we make in the future with power. Now people want other stuff, and so I think over time people will spread their stuff out, and there'll still be a need for some of those power things, because we still want some sources of power. So I don't think just lowering that would be the best approach.
Thank you, Chris, for tackling some of the questions in chat. I really appreciate that.
No worries.
Someone said that make a Reddit Q&A like you did for Redeem Citadel for this type of stuff. Definitely always looking at different formats. We definitely have to have FaceTime. We think it's just nice to be able to see, or you guys see us. But we can also explore doing a Reddit Q&A. It just depends on how much Jared can accommodate stuff in his schedule. Since apparently he's kind of.
I'd almost say that that's kind of what the forums, preview forums are right now. Like usually when we do a Reddit A&A, because people want to talk about class balance or something like that, and we're not currently previewing changes to it. Like right now we have, I don't even know how many threads, a dozen threads maybe, where answering questions, talking about stuff. So I think that's kind of the Reddit A&A right now.
Yeah, that was my response as well. It's like I asked the person what important questions were we missing. Like we, as a development team, we discuss, we talk, we argue in real time in terms of problem solving and feature creation and so on. Reddit Q&A is a huge amount of time for us, and also so much gets caught up in the type of words that are used, and the intent is lost. And so basically no. If folks want to do a Reddit Q&A, I'm not going to stop them, but I would much prefer us to have these kind of direct conversations, including, like Jared said, on the forums, where it's a lot more precise kind of ability for questions and discussion, and then in person here, so we can talk about, in real time about changes, what we like, what we don't like, and so on. So please let us know what important questions we're not covering, but also bear in mind that, it might be, it depends. Like Jared and I are still going to be looking at the forums, obviously, for the whole of this. But if this week we still see a lot of questions coming up for the end of the week, then we'll probably have another stream before the end of the week. Right? We'll do it as we would as a development team. We'll communicate as necessary using the best channels.
Sorry, go ahead, Jared.
Saw one question that said there's a lot more sources of ratings than the others, and is that intended? Yes, absolutely. The ratings have infinite growth potential, right? We can go up forever since it's based on item level and keep having items that are better than old items. Like, you can always do that. But the other section, that is just a set amount of percent. When that's full, it's full. So it's not meant that there's all these sources of others and that you're maxing out 40% on all your stuff. It's meant that you've got to pick and choose. You've got to decide where you want those other stats to be going to, which ratings you want to maximize out. So it's definitely intended that there's a lot more sources of rating for others.
So one of the things to clarify, we will be, I'll be uploading these streams up to YouTube so that they'll be available, for on demand as well later on. But we did get Misfit Mouse ask if we could, for those that came in late, if we could discuss the bonding runestones thing, which is like the exchange. How a little bit more about how the exchange is going to work and the binding status. So for those that came in late, who might have missed our discussing that.
Well, I think the binding status is not through your motive, to be honest, because they know the answer, but they want it to change. So the bonding runestone exchange is already there. Try it out in preview. As we've said many times now, we are most likely going to have some exchanges for other specific stuff like Radiance, but we're waiting a little bit longer to see specifically which items people have in excess of that they're now need to swap out. So once we have a bunch of bugs and the polish out of the way, we'll go over that. The reason why it's bound is because this is an item that you're already using for yourself and you want to swap with something. So instead of having it be a source for people just exchanging things to try to flood the market, whatever the highest, most valuable things are, they're exchanging it for what their character needs. And then if they don't want that and they want something they can sell around, then they can trade off the item instead on the auction house and approach it that way. But our exchanges will generally always be bound so that it keeps, the economy in a good place and keeps, it's really there as you want to swap this item out for your gameplay. So there you go. It's another item for your gameplay. And that's why it's bound.
Will the exchanges be, so go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, I thought we'd finished that.
Oh, I was just going to say, will the exchanges be permanent or limited time? Will we announce ahead of time, like how long?
So when an item's obsolete with the Ocean Stones, those ones stay up because those items are obsolete. Anytime people come back, we want them to go change that. When it's something that's an ongoing item like Radiant, when we make that exchange, it would be for a limited time because that is an item that will still have use. It's still in the game. People can still generate them. So that we would definitely have a limited time on when that exchange. So we tell people how long it was running.
So Smoky Dog has been very patient and has been asking the same question, but without spamming it. Please, could you give a small explanation as to why subclasses are still a thing for companions?
You mean why is there DPS tank healer companions?
Why
Subclasses are still a thing for comps?
Yeah, like
because they do different stuff. Well, I mean, those are two different things. So why we have DPS tank and healers, because you want different roles, right? Like there's people that want a healer companion because it's going to run around and they're going to be soloing, or they're going to be making a more glass cannon build. Something's going to heal them. And then there's people that want something that does more damage, and they want something that can absorb more damage from the critters. So I think that makes sense to have. Why there's still augmented fighting. So we actually had a thought that we would potentially at some point switch over to just fighting that gives stats. And we thought about that for a long time. If we did so, then we would have, given people tokens for their augments and changed to fighting companions, all that kind of stuff. But with this system, we basically tried out a middle ground. You get stats from both, so you get 85% of the item level towards stats for both fighting and augment, so you're getting a good amount of stature, and then the remaining 15% is if you want augment, you're getting bonuses to certain stats that you want, or you pick fighting and that 15% is going to damage. So I think hopefully that will bring the two types of companions a lot closer, because the bulk of it is still just straight out all your stats go up. And before, I think the issue was that you got a lot more stats out of augments, and so people just didn't even consider the fighting. So that's kind of middle ground we want to, and that's why we those things.
So it looks like they meant more like invokers, mythical creatures. Why do we have that division?
Oh,
stuff?
All right.
Which is I appreciate answers on both sides. So but yes, they want to know about those subclasses.
I mean, this is where it always gets interesting, because on the one hand, people talk about why you're doing so much change at once, and should we do smaller changes, should we do less changes, should we spread the change over time? But then on the other hand, people start looking at the changes, see all the other things that could be changed and they'd like to change. So we start getting, well, how about changing this and changing that and changing this? And it just becomes, that would be a massive change, even bigger than we're doing now. So basically with the companions, we just left that how it was. Subcategories, that's already how bolster work, that's already how it's all set up. So it's how the code behind the scenes set up, it's how the powers themselves look for those specific companion bolster categories. So it's like all that underlying is already in place. So we just kept that all as it was. A lot of people have called out suggesting changing that. It's not saying we couldn't. It would certainly be, I think, a bigger chunk of work than players think it would be. If we did that, we'd definitely have to cut the bolster values in half to line it up with mount, so that it would be a total of 10 companions, just like mount, so that it basically lined up with that completely. So there'd be other aspect changes too as well. So it's not that we can't do it. It would definitely be a chunk of time, be a chunk of work. Um, it can certainly be considered, but the reason why it is the way it is because that's what it's been online, and that was one of the areas we chose not to change at the time.
So I got Robert Rhoda from our team internally send me a question that he thought we might want to answer, which is funny because it's the next one I was going to ask, and let people know that we're going to start wrapping up. But the question is, how do you measure magnitude since weapon damage is gone?
It's still just damage. I think a lot of people have been thrown for a loop on that just because the term weapon damage, but it's just not called weapon damage anymore. It's still damage. It's still on your sheet. It comes from your item level. There's a nice entry for it, which says damage. And magnitude is still the percent of that the same way it was. So magnitude is still fundamentally the same in every single one.
Chris, anything else you wanted to address? Because if not, we're going to start wrapping up. And so I can start looking at the schedule when we can fit in extra streams for this topic.
Sure. I'd imagine that we should maybe probably do one later this week. Like, we're going to be, like I said, spending a lot of our time looking at the forums and streams and so on, and YouTube videos based on this conversation. After this, we're also going to be writing down actions for the next build. We have definitely the companion questions. So Smokey needs some follow-up, so I'll connect Jared and those two together in regard to that. But I guess overall, welcome to development. This is the curtain pulled back at 80% of a completed feature. Your support and feedback and problem solving and calling out opportunities and different things we could do is super important at this phase. I know it's not easy. The first time we did the CDP, people were a bit freaked out, but it got easier and easier to basically work together. I'm hoping that that is going to be the same with this new process. But it's scary for us too. We care a lot about the game, the team, the community. But it's exciting. But the goal is to build worlds together, and that's what we're doing. And sometimes be careful what you wish for. And then a comment previously in terms of why make so many changes and that kind of thing, or such a big change all at once. That isn't actually what we've done. What we've done is we've been working on various streams of refactoring the platform, and the project internally is called Ascension. And there are multiple areas across that we've basically upgraded in phases where you can now see them start to interlink and connect. And so it makes perfect sense, like we said earlier this year, that we would have to come up with a system that allows us to discuss and evolve and iterate on the work we do quicker, in a more meaningful way. And here it is for the time being, basically. We'll also look at this process and work out if we need to evolve that. And so feedback on this process would be really good as well. So in short, thank you all so much for your feedback. Totally understand, concerns in regard to legacy, but it's not our, it doesn't help anyone us saying everything's going to be okay. I mean, the whole point is we're developing this together. So it's a case of executing on intent, and that's what we are going to continue to do. My bird's getting antsy. So, yeah, maybe we'll chat later in the week. We'll certainly be on the forums. We'll certainly be on Twitch and YouTube.
Yep, and I will be communicating any future things that's happening, so stay tuned to our social media channels as well. But I do want to say thank you to Chris and Jared, especially over the weekend, the work they put in. I think we all treasure our time off, but we also understand that it is important sometimes to be there answering questions, and we hope to continue doing that. Thank everyone who tuned in. A lot of viewers. Again, I know a lot of questions we didn't get to them, but we are going to continue this communication and have a good cadence. So just stay tuned for more info, and thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everybody.